morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is, wherever you are right now. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. Now, for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. Now, my guest this evening is Todd Kimball, who's been a guest before in the past, and we talked about mainstreamed media. But since then, we've discovered the name has been changed. It's now United by Media, and we'll talk some more about that as we go into the show. And so, as you know, the show goes in two parts. The first part is what I call the bio part, where I talk to my guest about who he is personally, so you have an idea where he's coming from and what's behind his comments and questions and whatever during the discussion about United by Media. Todd is also a fellow humanist. He's also a progressive, and there's a few other things I can say about him, but I don't want to embarrass him. Can I tell the story about some years ago when you were a guest at the other studio and it was stormy, and you were in your wheelchair, of course, and you made it to the studio and you were soaking wet, and you said, no matter what, you're going to be there. And certainly you would talk about courage.
Well, hey, if in Oregon, if you're not willing to trudge through the rain, there are going to be a lot of times you don't get places. So
Yeah.
you just got to put up with the weather. But, you know, I love being in a wheelchair. I think it's a lot of fun. It's created a lot of opportunities in my life. But I do tell people that one of the disadvantages, one of the few disadvantages of being in a wheelchair, is that there are a lot of surface area for the rain to land on. You know, the walking people, they get to be upright, not much surface area for the rain to land on, but I got a big lap here.
So you were really incredibly soaked when you showed up at the studio then, but you hung on right there, and we finished the show, and it came off very well.
Yeah, well, thank goodness for summertime, right? Much easier this time of year.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. So how are you feeling right now?
I feel great. How are you doing?
I'm a little bit tired because I'm recovering from a total knee replacement about 5 weeks ago, and my stamina isn't what it used to be, but I'm a little embarrassed as I talk about my surgery on my knee, and you have been in a wheelchair for years and years and years, so let's stop talking about my physical stuff. Yeah.
Well, you're doing great. I know you'll be back to full strength here soon. So.
Okay. So let's just pretend that you haven't been on before and the people watching don't know who you are. So let's go through the bio segment here. Todd Kimball. Where'd that name come from?
Norwegian, I think, but I know that I'm a mixture of many European heritages, but basically you have to go back a few generations to really find where the name came from, but primarily Norwegian.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Walnut Creek, California.
California.
I'm 44 years old. I was born September 9th, so spent first 18 years of my life in the Bay Area. Then went to school, went to college at Fresno State, got my BS in finance and business there, and then got an MBA at Arizona State.
Wow, you believe in education, don't you?
I do. I'm thinking about going back one of these days, get a doctorate.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I started in my education, my advanced education, as I was older. So, and I'm also a student now with Senior Studies Institute, sponsored by Portland Community College.
That's great.
So I'm going to be in school when I'm 133.
Okay, that's good.
Is there anything significant about your cultural heritage, or are you just plain American white bread?
No, I don't think that it's too significant with my heritage. It is kind of funny, as a double-edged sword, I guess. I don't think my parents had much of a concept of disability issues, and but in a way that was good, because it kind of forced me to ignore my disability in the formative years of my life and kind of push through things. But then as I got older, I came to appreciate disability culture more.
Mm-hmm. So you've been disabled for a long time?
I have been since birth, cerebral palsy.
Oh, yes.
And I'll tell you one funny story about my parents and growing up. For the longest time, until I was maybe 12 or 13 years old, I used to think that I was adopted, because there were sets of stairs going out both the front and the back door of my house, and I said to myself, why would parents of a person in a wheelchair build steps out both entrances? But that's just how my parents were. They didn't think too much about disability logistics. So.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I do have a sister, a couple of years younger than myself, who lives in Pasadena. So.
Do you see her from time to time?
I just saw her this past month. Kind of made a dual trip to see very, very close friends of mine in Fresno. Their daughter graduated valedictorian from her high school class, and so I wanted to hear her speak. And my sister made the trip up from LA, and I got to see her and my 4-year-old nephew and my 2-year-old niece.
So that was a good time.
Oh, it was fantastic. It's great to reconnect with friends and family.
You betcha. Now, if I were to ask your best friend, who is Todd, what would your best friend say? He or she would say Todd is what? Fill in that for me.
Okay. I would probably say free-spirited, creative, takes a world view on things, cares about all of humanity. Those would be some of the things that I think they would say about me.
Yeah. Would they say anything about your easy smile?
They might mention I like to smile a lot. I like to keep life happy.
Yeah. Is any discussion about your religious heritage or your religion or your religious person?
Well, I wasn't raised in a religious environment, and I was actually kind of turned off from religion in my early years. I like to say that, and we can talk about this as a philosophy if you want, but I say that people with disabilities tend to fall in two extremes on the religious spectrum, either very much non-religion or religion is a huge part of their lives. And I have a theory about that if you want me to explain.
Please, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, I think for me, my disability happened at birth. And so as a young person, even in a progressive place like the Bay Area, people would come up to me and they would say, "Oh, can I pray for," with my mom being there, and they'd say, "Can I pray for your son? He's so cute. Can I pray for him? Can I heal him? Can I have him walk? Just with believing in God and prayer, you'll be able to walk again." And when people have the gumption to walk up to a family like that and say those kind of things, they're a little bit condescending. They have a tone about their voice that I think kids can pick up on. And I remember saying to my mom, "What's with all these religious people? Why do they do that? Why do they act so weird?" And my mom would say, "Well, they mean well, but they certainly they certainly do approach it in a strange way." So I think in that way I was always kind of turned off to religion. And there have been a few times in my life that I would visit churches, and people would say, "Oh, I know you're not religious, but my church is different, and you got to come to my church. Everyone loves my church once they're there." And so usually I would go there to impress women. Was pretty much my only objective in my high school and college years, and I never was really comfortable there. And so that's the spectrum of someone who is born with a disability. And I've talked to a lot of other people in my situation, and they have similar experience and similar views. But for someone who acquires their disability later in life, they typically go to some form of a rehab center, and rehab centers are based on the 12-step model, and believing in a higher power.
Yeah.
They're traditionally understaffed, so a lot of times the staff there will just hand somebody a Bible and say, here, read this. This will help you recover from your injuries. This will help you to feel better. So for the people that get out of rehab centers and do great things in their lives, obviously they equate a belief in God or a belief in a higher power as the primary form of strength. So they tend to take a deep religious conviction into the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. So you don't have a deep religious conviction now?
I don't. As you mentioned, I'm a fellow humanist, but and I think I always was a humanist. I just didn't realize it had a title and a formal gathering until about 7 years ago. I discovered it in Pals when I was reading a book on religions around the world, and I would flip through pages. It was like a one-page summary of different religions, and I kept saying to myself, no, 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 no. And then when I got to page 135, I found humanism, and feel good about that. I feel very comfortable there.
Yeah. Are you going to become born again? Are you going to go to another religion, or Muslim? Or
I doubt it. Is there such a thing as a born-again humanist? I don't think that exists, is it?
Yeah, so we talked about your education. What kind of work have you done?
I've really had 3 distinct careers, and in a way, they dovetail into what I'm doing now. But the first was in radio. I was very lucky that my first job was at a radio station in Fresno. I was a sportscaster for Fresno State,
Really?
which was really an incredibly fun job. I'm a huge sports fan. And so it was great, and I would broadcast the home games of Fresno State, and at that time they were in a conference called the Big West, so I would go to places like Long Beach and Fullerton and Las Vegas, and that was a very interesting work experience because this was in the early 90s, this was and late 80s as well. This was pre-ADA, and let me just say that college press boxes were not exactly the first things that were made wheelchair accessible. So I got carried up a lot of stairs in my broadcasting career, but it was a lot of fun. One of the best jobs that I've ever had. And then from that, once I attended graduate school in Arizona State, I thought that I was done with radio forever. But I discovered on a flyer, on the college campus, this radio show called On a Roll, which was a radio talk show on disability issues. And so I called into the show and made an instant connection with the host, and we became business partners and very close friends. And then we went on to syndicate the show, and we were on in 45 markets around the country.
Wow.
And then I was at a point in my life where, because we would travel a lot. We were not just radio hosts, but we were disability advocates, and we would travel to the different 45 cities where we were on, and meet with disability leaders and try and solve problems and help along the disability movement. And so I was traveling a lot. I was traveling about once a week to each of 45 cities. And at that point, this was getting into the late 90s. I wanted to get married, and my wife said, well, how's this marriage going to work when you're traveling all the time? So I was kind of ready to leave the show and do something else. Mm-hmm. And I transitioned into staffing. And for most people, they would think it's a huge difference between radio and staffing. But one of the things that we did was employment was a huge topic on our show, because there's a very high unemployment rate of people with disabilities. Mm-hmm. So about 4 times a year, we would feature employment as the major topic, and we would take on-air resumes where people could call into the radio show and talk about the type of work that they were looking for, and then we would send the tapes to our sponsors and different industry leaders, and we were able to place like 48 people in jobs around the country, primarily people with disabilities. We also took the resumes via email. So I really enjoyed the employment aspect, the matching aspect of that. And so I took a job with a staffing company in Phoenix once I left the show, and I did that for 6 years. And that gave me the knowledge that I needed to start my own agency. This staffing company in Phoenix, they weren't the easiest to work for, and people would quit all the time. But that worked to my advantage because one week I'd be in sales, and then the next week I'd be in recruiting, and then the next month I'd be in risk management. So it really gave me a broad spectrum of the staffing business and the knowledge and power that I needed to start my own agency. And then I did that here, and I ran that from early 2003 to 2008. Sold that, really didn't get what I wanted for it, but you know, 2008 was kind of when the economy, we could see the writing on the wall that the economy wasn't going to be very good. And even though you can still make money in staffing in a bad economy, I mean, I was in the business to help people and put people in jobs. And the definition of a recessionary economy is you have one job opening for every 10 people that want it. So it's kind of a depressing thing to have so many people disappointed or angry. So I didn't want to continue to own the company during recessionary times.
So it was probably harder people with disabilities than people who are not disabled.
Yeah, I think that the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is always going to be very much higher than the general population. I should have maybe looked up some recent statistics on that unemployment rate, but it's always hovered between 55 and 65% really for the last 15 years or so. Very high.
Yeah, okay. And you, United by Media, that's your new operation. That occupies all
absolutely.
your time.
And that's really the third transition, because in addition to my career in radio and my career in staffing along the way, I've always had to be a disability advocate, pretty much just to get things done for myself and make headway in the different fields that I've been in. But then, you know, you always want to help your fellow man, your fellow comrades with disabilities. So I was a disability advocate in my own way. And one of the things that I learned with On a Roll, the radio show, is that when you make yourself a member of the media, you give yourself power and access that you wouldn't have otherwise. And I always kept that lesson in the back of my mind. And so after I sold the staffing company, I began to work with people with developmental disabilities. And I said to myself, this is a population that really needs power and access. So I started at that time mainstream media, and we made a name change just in the last month to United by Media. There's several reasons for that change, and we're also sponsored by United Community Credit Union, so we have a nice name synergy there. But through United by Media, we're able to give people with developmental disabilities a media voice and access to cultural activities in the Northwest community here. And it's been a great joy for me, very rewarding, and also very rewarding to the 40 plus reporters out there with developmental disabilities that we have reporting on everything from theater to politics. So it's been a good time.
Yeah, wow, you've been really pretty well involved there. And you have a wife now?
I am not married now. Kind of a strange breakup story, which is sad. Which yeah, actually, you were the first person that I told about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I remember now.
very strange story.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, I'm fortunate to have some great people in my life at the moment, but no one that wants to marry me. We'll see if I can. We'll see if I can talk him into that. That would really make me the ultimate salesperson, right?
I'll be watching you. Yeah.
Okay.
Political persuasion. We know you're not a right winger or a Tea Partier, are you?
No, I'm certainly not. I will say that I considered myself a liberal to a moderate for most of my life. Mm-hmm. But then the Bush administration came along, Bush administration number 2, and that made me very, very liberal. It definitely seems like the Republican, the conservative movement has changed significantly over the last 20 years, and I've rebelled against that and become far more liberal.
Okay. You have any memberships in political, social, or civic organizations that are worth mentioning?
Well, I'm a big fan, a big advocate of Toastmasters. Toastmasters has been a huge part of my life. I go to Mac Toastmasters over at the Multnomah Athletic Club every Monday at 6:30 in the morning. Perfect time.
6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, perfect way to start the week, right? You got to stay busy, and there's nothing better to wake up and start the week than to have to speak in front of a bunch of people. So Toastmasters has been very enjoyable and rewarding for me. And I belong to several business groups in town that have helped propel the cause of United by Media. One is the PDX group, which is a group of community-minded business leaders that come together to help each other, and we have inspirational and informative speakers every Friday over at George Fox University in Tigard. And then another organization that I really believe in is one called Best HQ. It's a business incubator for community-minded businesses in Beaverton. So I have a small office space there and get to network with all kinds of great companies, both in the for-profit and the non-profit world. So.
My gosh, you're a busy, busy man.
Wow. Well, just remember, I'm just sitting down all the time, but I get some things done other ways, you know.
Wow, what a mind, what a mind. Any persons from the past that you liked or admired particularly? Any names come to mind? Even anyone alive today that you particularly look up to or admire?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the people from the past that I really admire is Norman Rockwell.
Norman Rockwell?
Yeah, because to me, he was so broad in his interests. Everything from writing to photography to art, and his societal commentary I just find very compelling. And one of the things, and I don't know what you're going to think of this, but he was able to stay true to his liberal principles and still make money in America, and I admire that.
Yeah. How is Obama doing in leading our country, being our president?
Well,
what's your opinion about his performance so far?
Well, I think to answer that question, you know, they say that the foundations of movements and of presidencies or anything that's important really starts from day one. And to me, Obama made a very severe mistake from the first day that he took office, in that one of the things he said was, we're not going to investigate the Bush administration. We're not going to investigate the wrongdoings of the past. Mm-hmm. And by doing that, in my opinion, several things happened. One, he gave the Republican Party more validity than it deserved. I mean, things were really bad. Everything from the torture and the waterboarding to the spying to questions about 9/11 to very, very questionable business practices, the deregulation of the financial industries, just many, many things that we could have uncovered, right? And by uncovering those, he would have continued the momentum that he had when he got elected. People would have really gotten behind his cause. But then what happened was he didn't, and the movement, but he didn't do that. He gave the Republicans a pass, and he said, we're not going to investigate the past. Let's just move forward. It's all about the future. But then when the economy stayed stagnant in the early portion and was really struggling in the early portions of his presidency, then Republicans were able to say, look, Obama's not doing a good job. Things aren't working, and we need change. And so the Republicans gained validity much faster than they should have. And the other thing that's happened, and this is where it brings it back to present day in his presidency, is, in my opinion, a lot of things about the Patriot Act and the wiretapping and all the surveillance programs that exist. I mean, those started under Bush, and if Obama would have had the courage to investigate the past when he took office, some of those things could have been repealed. But now, you know, our current political climate is blaming Obama for these things, And what Obama didn't do, and he should have, but I still give Bush much more of the blame, is he should have, repealed some of the surveillance programs that we have, in my opinion, and the wiretapping and the monitoring of phone calls, all that.
So, boy, he's just barely into his second term, and I was watching a program today, and the speculation was, the way it looks right now, they've got him pretty well cornered or boxed off, where he cannot do anything that's going to have him stand out as a president of some substance, of some character or leadership, because his opposition has been so successful and so strong in cornering him. And I'm afraid that this may be more true than not. With what's going on in the world and our performance on the world stage, politically and socially in other countries, and he's not taking a more affirmative stand, a more positive stand, then I think. What do you think?
Well,
I'm afraid for him not to be successful.
I think that sometimes keeping things on an even keel and avoiding major disasters is underappreciated in American culture, especially. I mean, things went from being pretty good at the end of. I mean, granted, there was a little bit of a recession in the tech bubble and that kind of thing in the late be things were pretty good at the end of the Clinton administration. And remember all the talk about what are we going to do about the government surplus? Should everyone be mailed a check? And why should the government have this amount of surplus? And then Bush in 8 years destroyed all that, went from a surplus to the biggest deficit we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And so you can tear things down, and this goes from countries to businesses. Things can fall apart a lot faster than they can be put back together. And the 8 years of the Bush administration was an absolute disaster. And it's going to take a lot more than 8 years of coordinated liberal policy, in my opinion, to overcome the damage of the Bush administration. You're talking 16, 24 years to really get America back to being a country with a middle class and a country with a broader scope of industries, in my opinion. And the chances of getting 16 to 24 years of coordinated liberal leadership not very high in this country. So Obama will be one of those presidents that never gets the credit that he deserved, simply because he was coming in at such a difficult time, and he was able to get a lot of things moving in the right direction. But again, no president could go from the depths of the Bush administration to anything that we consider to be real progress.
Yeah. Well, I see the clock is turning down, and we're about halfway through things here. So, Mr. Director Billow, shall we take a break here for a couple of minutes? And okay, looks like we are back, and I'm so glad that you hung around. For you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and whatever it is we've decided to talk about. And my guest this evening, Todd, and I have been talking about United by Media, which was formerly Mainstream Media, and the work he's been doing in this regard through the years to help out getting people with disability employed and recognized as normally functioning people. So you were going to talk a little more about United by Media. Shall we talk about that some now?
Sure. I think talking about the transition from mainstream media to United by Media, because it's been very profound for me. I mean, when I started the organization, mainstream media I felt like was a good name because it was kind of a play on words for the traditional mainstream media, Bill O'Reilly and Rush Limbaugh of the worlds. And mainstreaming also means in disability culture taking someone with a disability and integrating them into regular society. So it has kind of that play on words, plus the concept of streaming videos, because that's what we do, is we help people with developmental disabilities to experience Portland culture. And the way we do that is we get them press passes to events that they enjoy, like concerts, live theater, stand-up comedy, political rallies, business events. And with press passes, as members of the media, they go backstage and they interview the celebrities. So they've talked to people like Lyle Lovett and Louis Black and Greg Palast and Chip Kelly and celebrities from all walks of life. But from a business perspective, you know, cute play on words often doesn't work. In today's world, you got to be able to be easily found by search engines and not have confusion with other terms and things like that. So mainstreamed media was always going to confuse us with the Bill O'Reillys and that.
Yes.
And United by Media has a lot of power. I like the name, and it really, that's what we're doing, is we're uniting people with developmental disabilities with the worlds of music and theater and politics and business. Every time they go out and do an event, we're showing that people with developmental disabilities have intelligence, they have a sense of humor, and they're able to formulate great questions and do great interviews. So that's part of it.
Are you having any problems getting press passes for them?
You know, I have to say that publicists have been really good. And a lot of the problem with Portland has nothing to do with people with developmental disabilities. It has to do with Portland as an entertainment destination. People that come to Portland, celebrities, whether they're actors or musicians or sports stars, they're not here very often. Very few celebrity icons live in Portland, and so when they come to town, they're literally here for 1 or 2 hours, and then they're off to Seattle or they're off to LA or wherever they're next going. And so sometimes it is hard to find the time to interview them. So really it's more of a time thing, but publicists have been great.
So when you interview a celebrity, what do you do with the end product, with the interview? Is it a video or?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. It ends up on our website, which is unitedbymedia.org. And then we also utilize the social media. We have an active Facebook page. We have an active Twitter following. So, and really we'll customize the events in terms of how we do publicity. So, for instance, we did a feature on Dove Lewis, the animal hospital, about 6 months ago. And when we got done with that feature, we sent that off to different animal hospitals around the country, different veterinarians around Portland and other parts of the country. So each story has its own network of professionals and people that are interested in that topic. And the more we can showcase that video within that network, then the more people see it. And that's kind of the philosophy here.
So the people who you work with or who work with you are very happy that you're in existence and you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I get a lot of compliments from the reporters with disabilities themselves and from their families. Other than Special Olympics and a couple of smaller organizations, there's just not much in the way of entertainment, in the way of employment, and we do pay our reporters for their work each month. We have a program called Sponsor a Reporter, which connects our reporters with developmental disabilities with businesses that they enjoy. So when I sit down and talk to them about what they want to gain through United by Media, do they want to see concerts? Do they want to see sporting events? Do they want to be active in politics and advocacy? What do they want to do? I also ask them, what business would you like your work to be associated with? Where do you shop? What businesses do you admire? And then I approach those businesses, and I've been able to connect our reporters with local sponsors here in the Portland area. And so from that, they're able to be paid each month for the work that they do.
Wonderful. So the ADA, that act was very useful for people like yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, again, kind of a double-edged sword, but you know, to be able to mandate that businesses and governmental agencies provide access to people with disabilities, whether they be people in wheelchairs or with visual impairments or hearing impairments. I mean, the first thing that you have to have in order to make an impact on society is you have to have access and within that society.
Sure.
And the ADA provided access, and you know, I think the ADA is coming up on its 22nd year anniversary, and we've made some progress. I mean, I think we made a lot of progress in the Clinton years, and then we struggled a little bit in the George W. Bush years, but now we're kind of coming back with some enforcement and progress in disability rights and advocacy.
But there was some difference in those administrations.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, why was that? Was it greed or selfishness or what?
It was probably both those things and probably a few other things. I mean, again, not to harp on the Bush administration too much, but they definitely catered to multinational corporations, in my opinion, more than other administrations did, and then they catered to people with money and people with power, and that are not generally the disability population. So, you know, they had their people that they wanted to cater to, and others got ignored during those 8 years.
Mm-hmm. So you're still enjoying this work, huh?
Oh, absolutely. We're getting ready to expand, and that's kind of the other real meaning, and this is the true vision of United by Media, and one of the reasons for the name change is United by Media is not only about uniting people with developmental disabilities with different celebrities from cultural aspects of life, but it's also about uniting people with developmental disabilities between cities. You know, I want to have people in Portland networking and experiencing great events with people in Seattle and sharing videos between the two cities. And so I'm going to Seattle on Friday, a couple of days from when we're doing the taping here, to meet with a reporter there and hopefully get a chapter started. And then I'm starting a chapter in Central California, Fresno, where I went to school, and hope to have both those chapters up and running by the late fall. So.
Oh my gosh, you're a busy, busy, busy man. Yeah, and it's good for you, huh?
Oh, it's great. You got to stay busy if you want to stay happy, right?
So your website is pretty comprehensive, and it's real of use for people who go to the website and see what you're about.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you're going to see some great videos on there, and going to see some news and information about resources for people with disabilities. I mean, it was quite a transition and a nice trip down memory lane to take all our videos. We had over 300 videos from over 200 events we covered as mainstream media, and we're still transferring some of that over to our new site. Didn't transfer over too smoothly, but you know, we're getting all of those videos captured, capturing all the archives, and yeah, I think people enjoy our website in several ways.
And you're funding it, but probably takes a lot of money to do what you're doing.
Well, it does, and that's a challenge. I mean, we're fortunate to have Unitas Community Credit Union step up and become our lead backer. But the other thing, and this was a major shift in mindset that I've really enjoyed, is that when people talk about either nonprofit or for-profit organizations, they talk about establishing your business track record and establishing your cash flow and making things perfect before you expand to the next city. And I bought into that logic at first, but I've had a shift in how I approach things. I mean, I really view United by Media as a community resource, like a park or a library or something that everyone should have access to. And so when you take that mindset, it doesn't matter what the cash flow looks like. So my goal is just to get it in as many cities allow people with developmental disabilities to utilize it, to benefit from it. I want to get it in as many cities as possible, as quickly as possible. And to do that, you know, you do have to raise some funds, and we have a crowdfunding effort going on right now that people will see on our website when they visit unitedbymedia.org, because we need to purchase additional equipment. We need to do some training of disability leaders in our 2 cities, Fresno and Seattle, to really help them to maximize the benefit of United by Media. So we're raising money, but really it's about getting the organization in the cities and letting people with developmental disabilities utilize it and have fun with it.
So, what kind of a staff do you have? Are you the staff?
Well, for a long time, I was the only staff member, but eventually it got to be too much for me to do on my own. So I do have a wonderful creative director named Paloma, who has been a huge help to me. She's only 21 years old, but she's incredibly talented and dedicated, and she's part of that young generation that really, truly understands how to leverage social media, and she's been a great addition to the staff. And it's probably going to be 3 months, maybe 6 months before I add a third person, but in the original business plan of Mainstreamed and United by Media, I know that it takes 4 full-time people to operate this organization the way I think it should be operated. So, you know, we're still new, we're still in our growing pains, but I think we'll get there.
So your title is founder?
Founder, executive director.
Executive director. Yeah. And where's it going to be 5 years from now?
Well, I'll tell you, my goal, like I say, is by late fall, or at least by the end of the year, to have it in Seattle and Fresno. Those are the 2 cities that have stepped up and really expressed interest. Mm-hmm. Next year, I want to have it in New York, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C.
By next year?
By the end of 2014. And then from there, I feel like I'll have the blueprint, the method for making it a nationwide vehicle.
That's ambitious.
Well, you know, like you say, life is short, right? If you want to make something happen, you got to be aggressive, and you got to have a big vision, in my opinion. So.
And that satisfies a lot of your interest and your joy in life, and you're glad to be alive.
Oh, absolutely. I have a great time.
We had a couple of other things that we mentioned that we might talk about. Shall we move on from United by Media and talk about other stuff right now?
Sure.
And the name change, and the what about Snowden being nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize?
Well, probably not real popular in America, but I really I admire anyone who can pull the curtain from really showcase, you know, how things are, and it takes tremendous courage to show people the behind-the-scenes efforts of the government or big corporations, and I admire anyone who does that. So I do consider him a hero. That probably makes me not very popular with some people, but
Homeland Security has got your name down.
Well, hey, with the way I go through airports, they got my name down already. We already have a contentious relationship, so you know they can put my name down in darker ink now.
Anything peculiar, interesting or unusual about how you go through airports? You mentioned going through airports.
Well, it's a challenge for people in wheelchairs. I mean, they've gotten much more strict. They got the bomb-sniffing dogs that hold us up for 10 minutes or so as we go through, and then they take the chair apart in different ways. And
really?
Yeah, it's a major hassle to fly these days. Yeah. So, I had one. Just to tell you one funny story. I had a very early flight a couple of years ago to Austin. It was like a 5:30 in the morning flight, so I got to the airport at 3:45, and the person in the security line, Homeland Security, said, he's rubbing the residue detector, the sort of the bomb chemical detectors along my skin and along the chair, and he says, your seat cushion is coming up as an explosive device. And I said,
Wait a minute.
it's a foam cushion, and I'm bending it. I'm showing him. I'm like, how can anything be in here? And he's like, well, our technology is never wrong. And I said, well, I beg to differ. And then I said to him, I
You're a
said,
troublemaker.
yeah, I said, is this explosion going to happen soon? Because if it is, I really would like to sit somewhere else. So, so anyway, yeah, I've had my little dialogues with the Homeland Security people.
So people like Snowden and Bradley Manning and Julian Assange and even Daniel Ellsberg, those people have been really significant in keeping this corporate America in some sort of control, so that they're responsive to the population rather than the corporations who are really running our country nowadays. So Snowden, I agree. I think he's a hero. And if things keep going in the direction they are going with this administration, my making that sort of a comment is going to put me on another list too, and I'm on a bunch of it.
We make sure we fly together, huh?
So what about the Zimmerman was found not guilty in killing Trayvon Martin? What do you think of that jury's decision?
Well, I take a little bit different tact than some people. I mean, a lot of people had a lot of hostility toward the jury for the decision, and I don't think it was the right decision. Obviously, I was frustrated by it, but our legal system is based on technicalities, and it's based on minutia of procedures, and so a lot of times, you know, if the jury is truly following the instructions and listening to the evidence as presented, I mean, you do end up with unjust decisions. And I really look at the legal system as a whole, right? I mean, our legal system is based, if you think about it, okay, and you stop me, you tell me what you disagree with on this. But our legal system is based on choosing our so-called peers who are the most ignorant we can find on various topics, and because you can't have any opinions, you can't have any bias when you're going to sit on any type of jury. So we want to find the most ignorant people possible, and then we want to have the two sides, the defense and the prosecution, pull all kinds of tricks and present evidence and try and manipulate the evidence to reach a certain jury verdict, right? And jurors aren't allowed to ask questions during the trial. They're only allowed to sit there for hours and hours and hours and then deliberate afterwards. And we know that in today's society, that's not the right way to learn, right? Like we would never tell students, sit in the classroom for an entire semester, don't ask any questions as things are going on, and then at the end of the semester you all get together and you tell us what you learned, right? So I do think that there are some peculiarities of our legal system that lead to verdicts like this.
How would you change it?
Well, I think that I would have, instead of trying to have people who had no bias and were completely ignorant on various topics, I'd try and have experts on different topics, and you'd have like a panel of experts that could really bring some knowledge to the different issues. And then the other thing, even more important than that, I mean, I maybe could keep the jury selection in the same way, but I think the most important thing is that jurors should be able to ask questions, and they should be able to, you know, get the bailiff to interrupt the trial and clarify things as it goes along, and make it more of an interactive system between jurors and the prosecutors or the defense. And I think by doing that, you could expose a lot more of the truths of trials.
Well, the justice system in this country, as compared to other countries and other societies, I think it stacks up pretty favorably compared to other countries.
Yeah.
So do you think that Zimmerman should have gotten off, or he should have been convicted of something?
I definitely think he should have been convicted of something. Maybe not the most severe murder crime, but I think he should have been convicted of something. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what else are we going to talk about? Anything else come to mind for you right now?
Well, I told you I had a friend of mine who's also a member of Best HQ, the business incubator, community-minded incubator, that's doing some really exciting and I think important work with both the Beaverton and Portland school districts. And his movement is to replace textbooks with tablets, because textbooks, by their very nature, I mean, they're printed, you know, in many years prior, obviously. And he told me this story the other day, that his 11-year-old daughter, in her science class, in her textbook, it said, "Someday there will be solar energy." So clearly that textbook's outdated by about 20 years.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, and that's with my association with Best HQ, has kind of become a soapbox issue for me, the Oregon education system, because I don't have kids, and when you don't have kids and you're just a business person, kind of trying to do right in the community, you don't really know what the school system is like. But by being able to be around people who have kids, I've heard some horror stories, not only about textbooks, but all the furlough days that are taken in the school district. And you just don't realize those things when you're out there running a business. And I was like, wow, really? It's that bad? And he's like, it's that bad. But I think that if we can replace the textbooks with iPads and tablets, and have students have the access to the most up-to-date information, and have it be presented in a colorful and visual way that is kind of conducive to the learning of the ADD generation, I think that would be a good thing. So,
but then, who would provide the information in the tablets that you're talking about? Because there are fights going on periodically around the country now when it comes time to replace textbooks, like in Texas and places like that. And I'm thinking about intelligent design, and insisting that God and those kinds of ideas should have equal consideration in textbooks. So I'm thinking about who's really running the show and who's in charge here, because we can do a better job than we're doing right now as far as providing the means for our students to have objective information to make intelligent decisions.
Right. Well, I think that to answer that question, you really have to have a shift in thinking, because right now our education system involves the knowledge, but also the biases and the opinions of a teacher, combined with the information supplied in a textbook, which, based on current budgets of school systems, is often outdated. But by making the World Wide Web the information resource for various topics, you can compare and contrast ideas faster and easier, and there still will be a fight of which aspect of the web do we look to for our education. But to me, with as rapidly as we can access information, it's ridiculous to have a textbook be the sole source of any subject.
All right. Well, with that, looks like we're running out of time here. I want to thank you for coming on the show again. And did you have a good time this evening?
Oh, it's always a pleasure to be here. It's always great to see you, and you've got a great crew that does fine work in putting this all together, so it's great to be here.
Terrific. So keep your pens and pencils handy out there, because you may want to jot down something that will show you in the credits and in our public service announcements that are going to come up right now. And my director is going to put some PSAs on the screen for you to read. And there's a broadcast schedule for when you can watch my shows in Washington County and also in the Portland metro area. And the next PSA we have is to watch my shows on the web. Google Don Baham YouTube, and there's hundreds of shows on there through the years where I've interviewed all kinds of people, and people as sharp as Todd, and truck drivers and pizza makers and professors and researchers and MDs and like that. And I got to tell you about the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, because without the ACLU, our civil liberties would be further down the tubes than they are right now. The ACLU is a wonderful organization. I've been a member now for about 40 years. Next PSA we want to tell you about to get my shows broadcast regularly by your local public access station. Go to www.pegmedia.org and tell them to go to that site and learn how to have the shows available for them to broadcast. Okay, learn how to end corporate personhood. We got to end corporate personhood because we're losing our country for corporations and the super rich. So go to that website, move to amend.org, and learn how to amend the Constitution to say that corporations are not persons and money is not speech. And what else do we have to show you? Okay, thanks for watching this episode of Conversations with Dr. Don. And my final thought for the day is KFC. I'm running out of steam. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind. Be friendly and be charitable to you too. Thanks again for watching. Good night. See you next time. Bye-bye.